Welcome back. Welcome to the next session and discussion on Jhumpa Lahiri's a novel, The Namesake. We have already discussed the first chapter of this book, and this in this session we are going to discuss the second chapter of the book in detail. As I mentioned earlier, the prominent themes are the struggles of the first generation Indian-American immigrants, their struggles to raise a family in a country very different from theirs, the struggle, and it continues with the struggles of the second generation. Right? So it is a story of the first and second generation of immigrants in Indian immigrants in the United States. In the first chapter we saw uh, Ashima and Ashok, their first few years in Cambridge, Massachusetts, where Ashok is completing his degree. We are introduced to the characters. We come to know about the nature of their relationship as they wait for their firstborn. We come to know about their marriage. We also come to know about the events of their life, their past in Calcutta, uh, their education, their background, Ashok's accident. So all these are there in the first chapter, and we discuss them in great detail in that long session on the first chapter. So if you haven't seen that, maybe you can go and have a look at that session on chapter one. And the chapter two, the subsequent discussion now would make sense if you've already watched the sessions on the background to the novel and also this first chapter. So please go and do that. And now we move on to the next chapter of the series, of the book. So this chapter has two major themes. One, further highlighting the contrast between home and abroad, home in exile, India and America. And secondly, expanding sphere of Ashok and Ashima's life in America. And this is important since the namesake is a novel not only about uprooting, but also about rerouting, not just leaving home, but also finding a new home. So diaspora is not just about exile and longing for home. It is also a journey which ends not with coming to the foreign land, but with by away from making a home away from homeland. So yeah, so couple of things that are highlighted in this that we are going to discuss. We are going to discuss one of the main issues in the whole book, which is also referred to in the title of the novel, the confusion over Gogol's name, right? And this continues with the symbolism, the theme, the imagery of naming, and the difference between the ceremonies, the meanings, the understanding of the process of naming in two cultures. It highlights how the child's identity is conceived of differently in India and in America. There is also an expanding circle of friends, mostly Bengalis, that they find in America. Three family friends, all Bengali, Maya and Dilip Nandi and Dr. Gupta. They visit the child in the hospital, and Ashok remarks how fortunate the baby is when Gupta gives him a book. Says Ashok had to wait for years to own his first precious volume. But Ashima, on the other hand, thinks back to her and Ashok's family in India, and she feels pity for the child because the child is born far away from the network of loving relationships. So let's go to the novel and go over these themes, and then we would go on and discuss theme of American Dream, the Annuprashan or the rice ceremony, and so on as we discuss the novel. But first, let's go and read a little bit on naming and also on the expanding circle of friends. So, chapter one ended with Ashima and Ashok in the hospital waiting for their child to be born. And during that wait, we saw the flashbacks of their life in Calcutta, their marriage, and so on. Chapter 2 begins with the birth of the baby at 5 past 5 in the morning, and we get to see Gogol for the first time. We meet him for the first time. We get to see Ashima and how she takes in this whole process of birthing a child. Moving on to Ashok. Now, this is important, I think, and we should read this because this excerpt how Gogol and his name is a very important part in Ashok's life, something that Gogol, as a young boy, never does understand or empathize with. Now, this is Ashok for the first time holding his child, looking at his child, and when he looks back to the child, the eyes are open, staring up at him, unblinking, as dark as a hair on its head. The face is transformed. Ashok has never seen a more perfect thing, right? So it is like Ashok meets his son for the first time, and he has never seen a more perfect thing. He imagines himself as a dark, grainy, blurry present, as a father to his son. He imagines how he looks to the child. And immediately he's reminded of the night of the accident, the night that he was born again. The already Again he thinks of the night he was nearly killed, right? You remember the train accident where he nearly died and then was saved by this page from Nikolai Gogol's volume. So again he thinks of the night he was nearly killed, the memory of those hours that have forever marked him, flickering and fading in his mind. So that accident has never left his mind. It flickers, it fades, it's always there at the back of his mind. And it is like, his life is divided into two parts by that accident. Before the accident, where he was a Bengali, happy to live at home, see the world through the books, and then after the accident, where he gets this urge to travel, where he's born again as a different man altogether. Being rescued from the shattered train had been the first miracle of his life, but here now, reposing in his arm, weighing next to nothing but changing everything, is a second. So that was the first. Birth of Gogol is the second. And the name that he thinks, right? And he thinks of it as a darkna, as a home, a name for the family, the name that the parents are going to use for the boy. But that it is important because that name is a link for Ashok. It is a link to his past. It's a link that he makes between his past in India, the past which is marked by death, and the future in America, the future where the place where his children are going to make home, make their lives. So it is like a link between the past and the future. The name is a link. Gogol is a link between past and future. And it's also a link between India and America. This Russian name and this boy carrying a Russian name is a link that Ashok tries to establish between his life in India and his forthcoming life in America. As I mentioned, there are three visitors, all Bengali, uh, and they're all mathematics postdoc from Dehradun, bachelor in his 50, whom Ashok had befriended in the corridors of MIT. Why this is important? And here is Dr. Gupta gives the boy his first book, and Ashok remarks that he's lucky, uh, only a few hours and already owner of books, right? So it shows how important it is for Ashok, how important books and all. We discussed the books in the last session also, how books are constantly mentioned throughout, making connections uh, in the novel. So, uh, but more important here is we see a process of rerouting, making a new community, making a new family in America. So it starts with Maya and Dilip Nandi and Dr. Gupta. So when the child is born, they are there as a family, or in place of the family, right? They're there in place of the family. And Ashima thinks the same, though for different reasons. She also thinks that the boy is lucky, but though for different reasons. For as grateful as she feels for the company of Nandis and Dr. So Dr. Gupta and the Nandis seem to fill in the place, but there is, according to Ashima, there is a vacuum, right? There is an emptiness. Again, it is a marked diasporic condition where even as one settles down in the foreign land, there is always something missing. The missing flavor that we find Ashima searching for at the start of the book. Ashima and Ashok send a telegram to Calcutta announcing the birth of the baby to their extended families, and they await a letter from Ashima's grandmother, who has the honor. She's the oldest member of the family and has the honor for name of naming the baby. As they wait for the official name, the name that the grandmother has thought for the baby, that official name, or Bhalunam as it is called in Bengali, they name the child Gogol, after the author that saved Ashok's life during the accident. And Gogol is supposed to be the dark now, a name and an identity for the boy when he would be with his family. So let's read from the book itself. So, yeah, as I said, Ashima's grandmother is the one who has the honor of naming the baby, and she's thrilled at the prospect of naming the family's first sahib, right? First sahib, because this little child is being born in America, right? So the first sahib. Ashima and Ashok do not really feel any urgency, right? They do not feel any urgency to get the name because there is no, the child does not really need a name. Ashok and Ashima, here it says Ashok and Ashima are not terribly concerned. After all, they both know that an infant doesn't really need a name, right? He needs to be fed and blessed and to be given some gold and silver to be patted between on the back between the feedings and so on. Names can wait. In India, parents take their time. Naming is a very important business. It's not rushed. Parents take their time. It wasn't unusual for children to pass before the right name. The best possible name was determined. So it wasn't unusual for years to pass before the name. The best possible name was determined. So it's a best possible name, and it is not a process that could be hurried. And this has happened. They have examples on both sides of the family, and both the Nandis as well as Dr. Gupta understand it perfectly. And so, as they wait for the grandmother's letter, they get a daknam, right? They are going to uh, have a daknam because it is a practice of Bengali nomenclature grants to it is, it is, there are always pet names to tide one over. So till you don't have a name, you can always have a daknam or a pet name. So each person in Bengali culture, in community, has two names, right? In Bengali, the word for pet name is Dakna, meaning literally the name by which one is called by parents, family, and other intimates at home and in other private, unguarded moments. So these are persistent remnants of childhood, a reminder that life was not always so serious, no, not so formal, not so complicated. So it is a reminder of the simpler, easier spaces and phases of life, right? Spaces in the sense, when you're with family, so it's a simpler time. You don't have to be formal, serious. So it's an easier time. You can let down your guard and be what you want to be. That persona is signified by the pet name or the duck name. When the child goes out into the school, to the university, to the workplace, then he takes on a different persona of the man or the woman of the world, formal, serious, and that is signified by the official name or the bhalunam. So it is a remnant of childhood, and it is also easier time in life and also easier spaces of life, like when one is at home with family. They're reminded too that one is not all things to all people, right? You cannot be to your colleagues outside. You cannot be what you are to your brothers, sisters, siblings, your parents. They're two different personas, and they're two different names for those personas. So one is a pet name and one is an official name. They all have pet names. Ashima's pet name is Monu. Ashok's is Mittu. So Ashima at home, when she's with her parents, when she's with her brother, she's Monu. Similarly, Ashok is Mittu, but when they're outside, they are Ashok and Ashima Ganguly to the world. Even as adults, they are called by these names in the family. These are the names by which they are known in their respective families, the names by which they are adored, scolded, missed, and loved. So, all these intimate emotional ties of being loved, being missed, being scolded and rebuked by your parents. So, these are the names which signify intimate, close attachments, close relationships of life. This pet name is always paired by a good name or a bhalunam, which is identification in the outside world. So good names appear, official names these are, and they appear on envelopes, they appear on diplomas, telephone directories, and so on. So Ashima on the outside for the outside world, and Monu on the inside for the family. Good names also have meanings, and they highlight certain qualities, like Ashima means she who has no limits, or Ashok, he who transcends grief. Um, Dark Nam does not really have a meaning. It's meaningful, it's made meaningful by the attachments it signifies. But every person has two personas, and there are two names for those personas in Bengali culture. Now, this is something that is completely new and incomprehensible to the Americans, right? They cannot imagine. They need a name for the birth certificate. They cannot imagine a child existing without a name. They cannot understand why Ashok and Ashima have to wait for a name to come from the grandmother. They cannot understand why the parents have not chosen a name for the child themselves, and so uh, the Mr. Wilcox at who's the official making the birth certificate insists that they need a name, and he suggests a different tradition from America, from that is from America or the West, where you can name him after your ancestors or one of your ancestors. So he admits that he was actually Howard Wilcox III, right? So James the One, James the Second, James the Third, Elizabeth First, Elizabeth the Second. It's a fine tradition. The kings of France and England did it, he adds. So it is something in Western culture, in Anglo-American culture, the names signify continuity, patrilineality, or generational links. So the first name, often the father, the grandfather, the grandchild, they share the same name. But this is completely, again, we can see the cultural barrier there, we can see the cultural contrast there. This isn't possible. Ashima and Ashok, this is something that, just like Wilcox does not understand this need to wait for a name to come from Calcutta, Ashima and Ashok do not understand this kind of a tradition. This tradition doesn't exist for Bengalis, naming the son after grandfather or father, a daughter after mother or grandmother. This is a sign of respect in America and Europe, this symbol of heritage and lineage, but it would be ridiculed in India because each child, each person, the names are sacred and inviolable. They cannot be inherited. Names cannot be inherited. Names cannot be shared. These are inviolable identities that a person has. So it is inviolable. It cannot be shared. It cannot be continued. So there is a great effort, time taken. The process cannot be hurried because a name is always unique. It is sacred. It's inviolable. It is not shared. It is unique to a person. So since they still decide to wait for the name, they name the child Gogol, right? And this is again Ashok's. Uh, he remembers a page crumpled tightly in his finger, the sudden shock of lanterns glare in his eyes. So he remembers the name and the night of his accident. And naming the child Gogol symbolizes life, rebirth, re starting your life all over anew. So Gogol refers to the time where he started his life again after accident. He was reborn again after the accident, and now at this moment in their life, Gogol also signifies, the name also signifies another kind of rebirth or restarting their life in America. So Gogol, the name for Ashima and Ashok, is a symbol the symbol of rebirth, new beginnings, and starting the life all over again in a new place from a new from a new point all over again. We also see some changes happening in Ashima and Ashok's life as Gogol is born and grows up. They move houses, and this is important because changing houses, just like expanding circle of families and friends, is a symbol of rerouting. The changing of houses from a smaller house as a student now to to a house 10 minutes by foot to Harvard, 20 to MIT. This apartment is also a, it is a symbol of changing status, changing nature of their belonging, changing or the process of making a home, process of growing in America. So the changing houses signify different stages of their growth and their belonging to America. Of course, we see a little bit of Ashima's disappointment. The room is not, also, the apartment is not exactly how she had imagined in movies and books. It is drafty, it is, summer is intolerably hot. But she does not really complain because she has kept the disappointment to herself, not wanting to offend Ashok or worry his parents. So she kind of takes it in silently, and this refers to what we discussed in the last session also about this. The woman's what she wants, gender not sorry the yeah, the woman, what she wants is not really figured, it's not really paid attention to. The gender dynamics of the relationship are also portrayed in this very subtle manner, where she decides to be silent, she's unhappy, and yet she decides to be silent so as not to worry or offend Ashok or worry her parents. We also see, so it is not and also it is not just an interaction with other Indian Americans or Bengali Americans. We see them interacting, and we see this increasing as they grow, as they spend years and years in America, as their children grow up in America. We see this cross cultural encounters, but this is the first one that we see apart from the nurse Patty in the hospital. This is another group of people that they encounter in America, that is their landlords, Montgomerys. And here we see a very interesting contrast and the way the two cultures stereotype. Ashima and Ashok, we see this Montgomerys are a very bohemian, uh, a very different kind of a family from Ashok and Ashima, who are driven by tradition and customs. So, and equally surprised, I think Montgomerys are when they see non-vegetarian food being served in Ashima and Ashok's gathering, the rice ceremony. So we see the how two cultures tend to stereotype each other, and how the closer encounters bust these or destroy these stereotypes, making us question our assumptions about the other. So, coming back to the point of gender, here again we see Ashima and how she has to adapt to the life in America. There is no domestic help, something that she was used to in Calcutta. She has to do everything, and then to bring up the baby, deal with the bodily changes, and that kind of frustrates her. There is postpartum depression, and she has to undergo through all of it alone. They're not the And this kind of makes her feel sorry for herself because, again, as she earlier mentioned, childbirth is the family is important not just for the child but also for mother. And here through it alone. Ashok sees that. Now she wants to go back home. She asks Ashok to finish his degree and go home. Ashok just looks at her and then thinks of Mr. Ghosh and thinks of how he never wanted to go back. And we can see here, Mr. Ghosh saying, "My greatest regret is coming back." Ghosh had confessed to Ashok mere hours before he was killed. And here we can already see that Ashok is not going to uh, go back to India, however much Ashima wants. And again, we can see the gender dynamic here. What Ashima wants never really figures um, in the whole story, at least not till now. On the other hand, we see Ashima is not just, we cannot say that Ashima is just a passive uh, woman who knows where her husband is, or who is sent to where, and then her husband is, and then she cries and has can do really nothing about it. She here, after giving into depression, after crying, after giving into tears, here we see her making her way through the shopping, making her way, deciding to get up and live her life. And so she decides with this small step of going out and shopping for groceries, shopping for some rice. And that little gesture of going out is an act of defiance, also an act of taking control. That rather than feeling depressed, rather than waiting for Ashok to do something, she is going to take control. She is going to live her life in America. And then, of course, when she's out, she's greeted by a lot of strangers, and it turns out to be not as unpleasant or fearsome an appearance. And it gives her a kind of pride, and it becomes a daily routine. She starts going out, right? So another part of the process of rerouting, we talked about finding community, we talked about the houses. So here is another process of finding roots, making new roots, that is creating a routine. So rather than moping, rather than crying, she devises a routine, and that routine helps her to feel at home in America. So both of them devise a routine. She goes out, she goes to Ashok's university, they spend time together on the campus. Uh, she devises a routine for the child, and so in that process, she finds a home in America. So we need not see her really, although her arranged marriage, her journey to America is something that nobody really asked her about. Nobody really cared to ask her whether she wants to get married to Ashok, whether she wants to go to America. But this take control of her life, uh, create a routine and feel at home in America is something that where we see her agency. She does it herself. Nobody really, Ashok is too busy. See, she does it herself. So here we see her actively taking charge of her life. She's not all that passive as we would as her arranged marriage and uh, her journey to America would show. In between the lines, in between these 2 points of her life, we see some little incidents where we see other aspects of her character. And even as she makes home, she tries to keep up the connections. She waits for the postman. She waits for the letters. So there is a kind of she inhabits the two places at once. She is making her life in America, but at the same time she's carefully uh, keeping the links alive with India through letters where she describes the sun, where she talks to her mother, and she plans a holiday or a trip to India. So we see her becoming diasporic. And here by diasporic, I mean a person who is in between, right? Who lives in the two worlds simultaneously. She is in America, but she's also in India at the same time. She's also her heart and mind are also in India at the same time. So we can also say that the book is about the American dream, a very different kind of an American dream than what we have seen till now in literature, like The Great Gatsby, right? It's a very different kind of American dream, but nevertheless, the essence is the same. America as a land of opportunity, America as a land of freedom. We see how deficient that dream is, and yet we see the lure of that dream. So, Namesake can be read as a novel about the American dream, but not where one gets rich and successful really fast, as you see in the novels like The Great Gatsby. Here we see that American dream about is about it takes time, it's about hard work, it involves a lot of pain and suffering. So it is a story of diaspora where success in terms of being well settled and being well off comes over a period of time and comes sometimes over generations. It requires a lot of hard work. It is not a story of success like Gatsby, as I said, with euphoric highs and very tragic lows. It is marked by incessant hard work. It is also marked by pain, nostalgia, longing for home, and also for aspirations for a better future. Lahiri is telling us a story of a diasporic family and their migrant experiences where success comes gradually, your home at a time, a better job at a time. It is also tinged with loss, right? Loss of name. It is tinged with death of families far away. It is tinged with losses and pains that they are not one is not able to share with the family, and it is all a part of being diasporic. The most important scene, perhaps, in the chapter is, of course, the Anprashan or the rice ceremony scene, an eating that is evoked by the very nature of the custom. It is rice ceremony or Anuprashan. So Gogol is going to be fed his first solid food, right? And here Ashima cooks for their circle of friends, all Bengalis, of course, but and they're all bound by these shared memories, shared language, culture, and longing for homeland. And the whole ceremony is about, there are going to be three things: soil, pen, and dollar, and they're going to be put forward for the in front of the child. It is an old custom. Whatever the child picks up, that would signify his future vocation, his career. Ashok wants him to choose a pen, but we see the range of professions. But it is an old custom. When he grows up, there is a whole range of options and professions available to Gogol. He chooses neither dollar nor soil nor pen. He becomes an architect later, right? And Ashok, on the other hand, is an engineer and a professor. Ashima is a mother and a wife. Is going to choose his own path, right? He's going to choose his own. He's going to make his own way in life. It is also important, I think, we see different moments of longing for home, but the longing for home is overcome by these images of settling down in America. As I mentioned, the house, uh, image of Ashima determined, going out, making a routine herself, deciding not to cry and give in to depression anymore, taking control of her life. And then, of course, the expanding circle of their friends. It all comes together in that rice ceremony. So, and here we see as other aspects, like, uh, the circle of Bengali acquaintances is expanding. They're bachelors who go home, get married, and return. And Ashima slowly is has a growing circle, and she's also becoming a kind of an advisor, right? She's becoming an advisor to all the wives who are homesick and bewildered. So she gives them recipes, she gives them advice, she tells them where to buy fish. Basically, she is unlike, how she was at the beginning, longing for home, crying herself. Now she is slowly becomes a key person in the community to whom all the young wives go to, so that they can make a new home in America. Notice that also all these husbands or the men are, as I mentioned at the start, that they're all professionals. They're all well-to-do professionals who are making way ahead in America. Yet they keep ties with India, right? Even in the gatherings. So not only food, but here we also see songs by Nazrul and Tagore. They all sing together. They play harmonium. They argue over the films by Ritwik Ghatak and Satyajit Ray. They talk politics, Indian politics, and ironically also American politics, where none of them can vote. They are all foreigners. They cannot vote yet. They are not citizens yet. Gogol is going to be a citizen. But Again, discussing both the together shows that they belong to two cultures simultaneously. They are making their home in America, but their home is going to carry trace is their home is going to carry traces of India. And as mentioned earlier, literature, whether it is books or whether it is oral literature or films, stories, they all figure as uh, a part of a culture that is being transplanted into another culture. So usually during the Annaprashan or the rice ceremony, the child is supposed to sit in the uncle's lap, and the uncle is supposed to feed the child. Ashima regrets that her brother is no longer there, but at the same time, there is an honorary uncle, right? Dilip Nandi, right? Dilip Nandi is the honorary uncle, and although Ashima feels sad that her brother is not there, that the plate is melamine, it's not a silver plate or even a steel plate as it would have been in India, she still tries to keep the custom alive. So here we can also see another aspect of rerouting on making a home where whatever is available, the diaspora, whatever is available, they modify customs, they change the customs, adapt the customs so that the customs are no longer completely Indian. They become Indian American. They become fusion. It's like a fusion. They become hybrid customs of a hybrid community, which are Indian and American at once. The chapter ends with their preparation for a trip to India, where we also hear that Gogol Ganguly has become an official name on the passport. So we see the problems arising here. The child is still not named properly, and yet once it is on the passport, it has become an official name. Ashima shops for the impending visit to India. She buys gifts and presents. She loses all that on the train, right? She loses all that on the train, and then later the next day she finds it. And Maya Nandi reminds her that only in this country this would not have happened. This find and lost. The friends listen. They are amazed at her love. They are amazed, and they acknowledge that this could happen in America. This could not have happened in India, according to them. So, only in this country. And here also we see a process of, a recognition in a way of America as a, as a country where they belong. They have started feeling a kind of belonging, a kind of pride, a kind of admiration for. So only in this country. So a recognition that life is offers a lot in America. The chapter ends on a terribly tragic note about the death of Ashima's father, and she gets the news. She gets the news when in the night. They get the news in the night, and the brother is not able to tell the sister, and so he passes the news to Ashok. Here we see another tragedy of a diasporic life, right? Not being there when your loved ones pass away, not being there at the important junctions of the lives. We see the distance, we see their growing distance from the family, from the events in America and from in India. And this death of the father brings home this reminder that they are no longer there, they're no longer a part of the day-to-day life of their families. It is a first death and it is the first of many deaths that they would hear about, and it is made more poignant by the distance between Calcutta and Cambridge. It brings home the fact that though they might visit home on the holidays, though they might try to keep in touch, write letters, even talk on phone, they are slowly growing away from their families in India. And the realities back home, because even when they visit India year after year, India has changed, the families have changed, there are new additions to the family, the people that they knew, their parents one by one they pass away, so that the family that they left back home is no longer there when they come to visit for the family. So the home, India, Calcutta, their families in Calcutta are also changing. So each time they return, the home is not the same. They grow, they change in America, but the home in India is also not static. The home is also growing, the home is also changing. And the two in different directions, and they're growing in different manner. So the return to the home of their youth is no longer possible. It is, they are going to be permanently diasporic, permanently in exile, but at the same time finding a new route, finding new grounds in America. And with that, we come to the end of this session. uh, Please, if you haven't watched the other two sessions, please go ahead and watch them for a greater understanding of the novel. We have completed chapter 2, and in the next session we are going to discuss the next two chapters, chapter 3 and 4. So yeah, so keep watching, follow this series of lectures, these discussions on the namesake. Thank you.